What's up, everybody? A couple nights ago, I was able to sit down and watch part one of Rebel Moon, Zack Snyder's director's cuts. So let's talk about it. Just to give some background on these movies for me, when I had heard that Netflix was going to be releasing these movies in the format that they did, where they released the two PG-13 cuts first, and then they were going to allow him at a later date to release the R-rated director's cuts. I made the decision at that point to not watch those original PG-13 cuts, just because me being a fan of Zack Snyder, I know that typically his director's cuts are typically superior than the original, theatrical or streaming cuts like we got with this movie. So I just said, hey, I'm not. They did it as a marketing ploy. Netflix did, it seems like. So I just said no. Like, they're not going to get the viewership out of me on those PG-13 cuts, and I'm only going to watch the R-rated cuts. Before I get into my review, I mean, the thing that irritates me the most about that is that was the whole reason that Zack Snyder fans were even excited for him to go have a deal with Netflix and make movies, was because we assumed it's streaming. He'll be able to make his true vision for any of his movies the first time. We won't get this whole director cut nonsense that we've gotten with the movie studios. And, so when Netflix decided to do that, I said no. I'm not gonna give him the time of day. I'm gonna wait until the R-rated cut comes out, and I'm gonna watch it. And hearing the reception that those two PG-13 cuts got, I made the right decision. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to lay that groundwork, before I actually get into my review of the movie. That I have not seen those PG-13 cuts. Don't plan on it. Only ever plan on watching the R-rated versions that Zach intended. So just wanted to get that out of the way. So with all that being said, let's talk about what I thought about the movie. I thought it was exactly what Snyder promised it was going to be. It is a unique, subversive, R-rated version of Star Wars. Very violent. More of a grounded, realistic take to me on what an empire, like an evil empire over a galaxy like this, would probably be like. And to me, it was refreshing. It was something, that Star Wars, the franchise, will never offer. It was going to take someone like Zack Snyder, who has such a unique, distinct style, to tell a story like this in this type of setting. I know it doesn't take place in that universe, but it feels very much like it could take place in that universe, and it shows you the dirtier, grimier aspects of what would actually happen if there was a whole, uh, I don't remember what they called it in this movie, but like an empire over these galaxies. It would be ugly. It would be dirty. People would die. It would be very violent. People would be abused. It wouldn't, it would be dark. It'd be very dark. So that promise, I think, Snyder fulfilled on this movie, and it was a very, unique version of this story, and I enjoyed it. And then, of course, with it being a Zack Snyder movie, you have to talk about the action. I mean, of course, like always, he just delivers. His action sequences and action choreography that he has in his movies are always great, and Rebel Moon was no different. Every scene was fantastic, had me on the edge of my seat. There were stakes. You felt like anyone could die at any given moment. And yeah, that's a typical staple of Zack Snyder's movies, and again, he delivers in this film. And of course, with this being a Zack Snyder director cut, this is a very long movie. It's almost 3.5 hours, if I'm not mistaken. And, to me, that allows the plot and the story to be very fleshed out and developed, right? So, the first hour, this movie just like is go, 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 right? And it lays out the groundwork for this world, for the story that we're going on, for the characters that we're going to be, on this journey with. And I thought that was great. And like I said, with a lot of his movies that are longer, tend to have a more fleshed out story compared to the other movies that he does that are shorter. And yeah, I think that benefited the plot the most and the story the most. So that was a great part of the movie for me as well. And then my next positive is going to be on the main character, Cora, played by Sofia Botella. I thought she was a great lead in this film. Zack Snyder, to me, tends to write, female action stars very well. He makes them very strong. He makes them independent. He makes them stand on their own. Not have to rely on other characters. And it's the same with the character of Cora. Her backstory in this movie is very intriguing, very interesting. You know, it's revealed in kind of flashbacks throughout the whole film, so you don't kind of get it all at once and understand. You know, the backstory is revealed as the story goes on, and basically it's needed so you can understand more about her. So yeah, I mean, she was a great lead in the film, and I had no complaints with her or her acting throughout the entire film. And to piggyback that off of talking about characters and actors in the film, Ed Skrein as Admiral Noble in this movie is a badass villain. There is like a 20-minute opening sequence in this film that is entirely dedicated to just immediately telling you how horrible and badass of a villain that he's going to be in this film. And he just carries that every throughout the entire movie. Every time he shows up, you get nervous, you get tense, you get on the edge of your seat because you're like, I have no idea what's about to happen here. He has a movie that's a scene in the movie. It's in like the first hour, that isn't the opening where there's conflict going on between him and two other characters, and you think he's going to do something crazy to one of them, but then he subverts and then does something crazy to the other one. And it's, yeah, I don't want to get in spoilers, but he's just menacing every time he's on screen. And his chemistry also, too, with the main character in the movie when they finally meet is great. So, yeah, I feel like the hero and the villain of this movie, Snyder did very well. I was very invested in their kind of cat and mouse game that they had going on, and yeah, I was very impressed by how much I bought into the story and bought into these two characters. And then the last thing I want to talk about for my positives is just the groundwork and the world building that this movie does. I am upset essentially with how the reception of those first two films were and how it's kind of tainted the name of this franchise, because if it goes past, part two, I'm very interested to see what they can do, because it, like Star Wars, like the real franchise, there's a lot here. There's a lot they can explore. There's a lot they can do with this franchise, and Snyder can do specifically. So I was very mesmerized by this world, and the groundwork and the world building that they did in this film. And like I said, if they ever do sequels, I will be excited for it. And this is someone who hasn't even watched part two yet. So yeah, great world building, great groundwork, and looking forward if they do anything else. And also, I wanted to add, even though this is a part one, it did a great job wrapping up the story in a satisfying way, but then still leaving a couple of loose ends so that way you're excited for part two. Like, I expected it to be more of kind of a cliffhanger leading into part two, but this is actually a definitive end to this story, and then just kind of sprinkles a little bit in there for part two. So I thought that was great as well. So even though I clearly am a big fan of part one, it wasn't a perfect movie. I have some things that I'm a little bit mixed on. And the first thing is the pacing, right? To me, this film, it's 3.5 hours, right? So it's a very long run time. The first hour, absolutely fantastic, edge of your seat stuff. The last hour, same thing, very fantastic, satisfying conclusion. But in that middle part of the movie, kind of in like the second act, I won't give any plot details away, but there's just certain the story and the plot kind of takes a little bit of a halt. So the pacing was a little bit off because of that. So yeah. And even though I like the hero and the villain of this film very much, because of that halting of the plot in the second act, I feel like some of the side characters didn't really get fleshed out as much as they probably should have in a 3.5 hour movie. So that was a little disappointing for me. But I haven't watched part two, so I don't know if they're gonna get more fleshed out there. We'll have to see with that. And being a Zack Snyder fan, this one is a little bit disappointing to me. I know how much he loves slow mo and how much he uses it in his films, but it was noticeable in this movie, and I felt like was used a little bit excessively. Right, like I said, this is the first time I've ever actually had a complaint about that. I've usually never had a problem with it in any of his other movies. A little bit noticeable in this film, and it was a little bit mixed for me. But that's what I think about the film, guys. Go ahead and comment below if you've seen the director's cut and you want to talk about it. I plan on watching and reviewing part two tomorrow, and then kind of maybe a little bit extra in the film video about little bit of a rant about Snyder and how this was all handled and everything as well. So yeah, I'll probably have that out in the next day or two. But yeah, for me, I think it was about a 3.5 out of 5. No, actually, you know what? I'll say 3.75 out of 5. Very much enjoyed it. Very much looking forward to watching part two. All right, guys. Have a great day.